Our next guest brought to you by the Arnold Palmer designed Whistler Golf Club. And what a 2024 season it has been already. Amazing reviews on course conditions and service. Group organizers, it is not too early to get your September, October corporate buddy trips booked. Prime time's filling up fast. And if you do so, you, the group organizer, plays for free. Tell us about your group at whistlergolf.com/groups. Here he is, our Canucks reporter, rink-wide host, Mr. Jeff Paterson. How are you?
I'm good. I was up at Whistler last week, and I can vouch for everything you just said there. Everything but the Bears. We didn't get the Bear experience.
You didn't get any Bears.
No Bears, but golf course in remarkable shape. And I think the 13th hole is my favorite hole up there. It's the dogleg left when you turn the corner and you get the vistas of the ski hill and the ski runs cut into the mountainside. It's just spectacular stuff.
That hole kills me.
I've never played that hole well, but I hear what you're saying.
Yes.
From aesthetic point of view, that is absolutely a gorgeous spot on the golf course. Jeff, the big Canucks news this week was Arturs Silovs re-signing as an RFA, a 2-year deal at $850,000, and that had us talking this week about goaltending duties and assignments this coming season. First of all, just your thoughts on the contract for Silovs, and then your thoughts on, what we should expect and what the Canucks should be asking of Silovs here this coming season.
I'm going to admit I was a little surprised at the dollar figure. Honestly, I thought for a guy that played 10 playoff games, I thought that in and of itself might be able to drag this above the $1 million threshold. Like, he had no leverage. I understand that. So I wasn't expecting him to break the bank here, but the way the contract's structured as well, it's $800,000 in each of the 2 years with a $100,000 signing bonus. So there's not even a nod in the second year that if he has a big year here, he's going to be playing the second year of the contract at $800,000. It's an $850 hit because of that signing bonus. But I kind of thought just the trajectory that this guy is on, like maybe 800 in the first year and $1 million in the second year or something. Throw him a bone, but hey, it looks like the Canucks were prepared to grind, and they ultimately did. I know there were some out there that were worried about other teams pouncing on an offer sheet. It makes for great fodder every year. I mean, how much time have we all spent in this business talking about offer sheets, and they never come to be, really. So I wasn't too worried about a team swooping in on that. I just thought it was a case of he had no leverage. He understood he basically was going to have to take what they gave him, but I kind of thought that the number might be a little bit higher than that, because this is a guy that was a 6th round draft pick in the 2019 draft. I went and looked this up. Only 6 goalies from that draft class have touched NHL ice, and he's one of them as a 6th rounder, and he's got 10 playoff games on his resume already. And so just by comparison, it's always hard to sort of figure out where goalies are in their development, but Arturs Silovs has 9 regular season games. He's played more playoff games than he has regular season games in the NHL. So that's a bit of a quirk in and of itself. But beyond that, he has 10 playoff games on his resume before Thatcher Demko had ever played an NHL game at the age of 23. So, apples to apples in that regard, just in where he is, the way that he's been able to progress through the ranks. Ian Clark had an eye on him, banged the table for the Canucks to draft him back in 2019. He saw something then, and I still think that Ian Clark sees something here now. And so to have the quality of goaltending that the Canucks appear to have at under $6 million for each of the next 2 years, like, giddy up, that has to be a competitive advantage for them almost every night out.
There's 2 questions or 2 purposes for Arturs Silovs. One is to provide cover for Thatcher Demko, obviously, and rest for Thatcher Demko. But the other thing the Canucks are looking at there is there a goalie of the future there as well? Where do you think they are on that calculus? And, are the next 2 years here, maybe even the next 12 months, critical in that evaluation as Thatcher Demko finishes off his own contract?
Yeah, I think the next 12 months are massive for the Vancouver Canucks because, look, we don't see goaltenders traded at the trade deadline, right? Like, I think Ryan Miller might have been the last big-time goaltender that was traded at the deadline when he went from Buffalo to St. Louis, and that didn't work out for him very well, and then he ended up here in Vancouver. But you just don't see big-name goaltenders move at a trade deadline. So if goalies are going to move, it's most likely the offseason, right? And we saw that with Jacob Markstrom a couple of weeks ago. So just to follow sort of that train of thought, if the Vancouver Canucks, a year from now, they can enter into extension contract or extension talks with Thatcher Demko, if Demko stays on the trajectory he's on as a Vezina caliber goaltender for a second straight year, he's going to be asking for a massive raise, and so he should. Connor Hellebuck gets $8.5 million on a long-term deal in Winnipeg and is probably underpaid given the role that he plays for the Jets there. But I think, that's the sort of ballpark that you're looking at for an ace goaltender in the prime of his career. The problem is, even as the cap goes up, guys, and Brock Boeser is in this same conversation, you can't just keep doling out long-term contracts to every single player on your roster as much as you like them, as much as you drafted and developed them. Look at the Chicago Blackhawks through their 3 Stanley Cups. I mean, they kept changing. They built around a core, but pieces in and pieces out. Tampa to the same degree. You get good. These guys earn raises, and then hard decisions have to be made here. So I'm not trying to chase Thatcher Demko out of town. Please hear me when I say that. But a year from now, if Artur Silovs continues to develop, then yeah, I think the Vancouver Canucks are going to have a really difficult decision on their hands in terms of what do? You've tried to build this team into a contender. He's a core piece of that. He's done everything that you want in terms of, putting himself in the Vezina conversation, but can they afford to, dole out another big time contract to a guy in a key position? And so just be mindful of that, park that in the back of your mind. But I do think that is one of the storylines to follow here as this next season progresses.
We had asked earlier this week over under 27.5 starts for Silovs, about a third of the NHL calendar. I like the way you framed it in Canucks Army, in your Canucks Army piece. What's more likely, Demko starting 60 or Silovs starting 30? So what do you think in terms of usage, Jeff? Because you're the guy who brought us the theory, the backup goaltender, he's got to get you 15 wins or so during the course of an NHL season.
I think we're at a point in time, guys, and I hope that Thatcher Demko would subscribe to this as well, that the regular season just really doesn't matter for him. He needs to be healthy and available on day one of the playoffs, and I know that he was this time around and wasn't available on day 2. And part of that was him working his ass off to get back and ready for those final 2 regular season games, and then got the 1 playoff game. They can't even contemplate the idea of 60 starts for Thatcher Demko. I'd like to see them cap it at a lot closer to 50, but we've seen it with Travis Green. We've seen it with Bruce Boudreau, and we certainly have seen it with Rick Tocchet as well. You got an ace in your bullpen. You're going to turn to that guy. And the Canucks are going to want to get off to a good start to prove that last season wasn't any sort of fluke and that they can pick up where they left off. And what's their best chance of doing that? Playing their number 1 guy and playing him a lot. And so, that's a bit of my concern, is that if they play Demko a bunch early and he plays well, then there's probably this sort of internal pressure to keep playing your guy. I think this organization, from management through the head coach and in concert with Ian Clark, like, they have to show some real discipline here. Get Silovs some early season starts. Let him continue to prove that he's an NHL goaltender. And he can build up his body of work here and build up his resume. And every time he's out, it's a night that Thatcher Demko isn't being forced to run out there and do what he does. So I'd love to see it closer to 50 and 32, but I think you guys were, that's a pretty strong balance in that sort of 55-27 kind of range. And of course, that all hinges on health. And look, with Thatcher Demko, that is now part of the conversation, whether he likes it or not. And I don't think he does like it, but it is part of his storyline. Can he stay healthy? Can he stay healthy to deliver? And especially when the Vancouver Canucks need him most, because to get the Edmonton Oilers to 7 games in the second round of the playoffs, and to do it on the back of your third stringer, if you had your number 1 guy at the top of his game, are you telling me that there wasn't a game in there somewhere that the Canucks lost that maybe Thatcher Demko wrestles away himself from the Edmonton Oilers? And so he knows how good he is. The team knows how good he is. But in order to prove all of that when the chips are down, he's got to be completely healthy and ready to go come postseason.
Yeah, Silovs was 8 out of 10, but Demko has the ability to go 10 out of 10 on a given night, and that could have saved a game. Yeah.
Jeff, you and Blake, you've mentioned this as well, the contract and how it came in and how friendly it is for the Vancouver Canucks. And Jeff, you mentioned grinding them and every last dollar. Well, there's good reason for that. As we saw this week with Puckpedia carving out the Canucks 23-man opening night roster, which includes Tucker Pullman. I mean, it gets you to $166,000 from the salary cap, which allows you to maximize or close to maximize most of the bonus overage with Pullman on LTIR. Has us wondering, is that it? Are they done? Do you think there's no more moves coming between now and training camp? And really a training camp where there won't be a whole lot of battles for jobs on the team, just positions within the lineup.
Yeah, my sense is that they are done, that we're not going to see any sort of splash from the Canucks between now and training camp. Now, that said, I'm well aware that in the second week of August last year, they found Pia Suter out there on free agency, and that turned into a terrific signing for them, not only last year, but to have him this year at, $1.6 million, able to extract all sorts of value there. And I'm really curious to see how they utilize him. I do think that he's the best option as a third-line center this time around, but that you've got the fallback position if others don't work there with JT Miller and Brock Boeser. Yeah, he's a heady player who just fits in seamlessly and can go about his business. So to get that sort of versatility on a guy at the price point they did, that was a terrific move in the offseason. Is there that kind of player lingering? There are still unrestricted free agents out there without a doubt. I think what's more likely for this group in their cap situation is to wait closer to training camp, where there are going to be some teams that feel the squeeze, and we may see some teams shedding salary, willing to retain. Beyond that, setting an opening night roster where maybe an NHL player shakes free that way and feels the squeeze. A guy that maybe a team doesn't think they can get him through waivers and they're willing to trade him at pennies on the dollar. I think those are more likely because, look, since Jim Rutherford took over, how many times have we heard him talk about wanting that cap on the cushion? They have a way better handle on their salary cap situation now than when they took over, without a doubt. And they have reallocated money into positions of need, and they've done a pretty nice job of that. But they're still bumping up against the cap. They don't have that cap cushion that Jim Rutherford has openly spoken about. And I know that they're a cap team and have been for a long time. And, you can say what you want about the ownership, but they're willing to write those checks so that this group can operate right up against the cap every single season. But last year in season, they were able to take on Nikita Zadorov. They were able to take on Elias Lindholm because they could fit those guys into the cap. Like right now, the roster looks decent. Like I'm encouraged. I'm excited. I like the free agents. I like the work that they did on July 1st. But if it's a good team and they want to make it even better, there are still needs on that roster. How do they go about addressing those? Because they're really not operating in a position where they've got a surplus of cap space. They have a little sliver of cap space that can grow if they accrue it over the course of the season. But if they want to, use that LTIR money and try and pick up a, $2.5-3 million player, sure. If the right guy's out there, I suppose. But I think it makes more sense. I'd like to see this group operate with that little cap cushion, as small as it is. And Alvin has talked about the fact that, last year they weren't able really to bring guys in from Abbotsford, guys that had earned an opportunity because they were just so up against it and dollar in, dollar out all the time. Like, I'd like to see them operate where they have a little bit more wriggle room, and that if some guys are pushing from the farm and deserve an opportunity, just even for a look-see, whatever the case, that would be my preferred way of operating, but they don't consult me on these matters. So ultimately we'll see how they go about doing their business this year.
The real lottery win would be trading away Tucker Pullman's salary, having that much space then, and having that expand as the season goes on so you can acquire an even better player come December. Isn't that the way to go?
It's certainly an idea that's been floated. For whatever reason, that hasn't happened. And there are other teams out there that could benefit from one of these players and it's unfortunate for Tucker Pullman. Basically he's retired here, right? Like he's not coming back at any point in the final year of this contract, and he's not getting another contract beyond this one. So terrible circumstances for him, sort of the forgotten man, out of sight, out of mind, and yet he lives on the books. And so, I know that idea has been floated about peddling what's left of his contract, and hey, maybe that's an avenue that they will pursue, but it's something that's been talked about for a while. It hasn't happened to this point. So I'm not convinced that it's going to happen, but let's see how things play out there.
Paterson, we heard from him this week, Jeff. He spoke to his hometown Swedish newspaper. We have been talking about line mates for him and whether or not he needs to ascend to the number one center spot. Let's tackle that second one first. This time next year, Do we need to be talking about Elias Paterson as the Canucks' #1 center now that he's an $11.6 million guy?
Well, before I answer that, I thought it was interesting. It sounds like he's a camp counselor back home in Sweden this week, running his own hockey camp. I wonder if his students are grilling him about his performance down the stretch and into the playoffs and the new contract kicking in. Yeah, look, you don't make that commitment to a player without expectations that he is going to deliver over the bulk of the contract. And so I don't know if it happens this season, because I still think JT Miller is very capable of backing up his 103-point season with something close to that. But at some point, there has to be a transition here. They didn't dole out the money they did to Elias Pettersson to have him be a second-line center. They believe in this guy. Players that get 102 points before their 25th birthday are few and far between. We've seen it from him. He's been a star in this league already. I think he's the kind of guy that you bank on, but that doesn't excuse for a second his performance down the stretch and into the playoffs. And it was pretty clear that the organization wasn't really buying what he was selling about the tendonitis in the knee. So I think they sent him away and basically said, get in the right headspace, come back and be prepared to dominate. And I do hope that we've seen this from him before, guys. Some strange things fuel him, right? But whatever it is, like if he perceives that he's being doubted in this market or around the NHL, or if he takes not being one of the first 6 guys named to Team Sweden for the Four Nations face-off, like if he took that as a slight, whatever, like if it can propel him to hit the ground running and get back to being the player that he was, not last season, but the year before when he got to 102 points, then I'm all for it. But yeah, I mean, he has to, at some point, sooner rather than later, he's got to become the #1 center for the Vancouver Canucks.
Well, as you outlined, Jeff, the doubts are in his own organization. I mean, Rick Tocchet and Patrick Alvin's response to the knee injury effectively amounted to, my words, not theirs, but you got to toughen up, kid.
Yep.
So that's going to be a most interesting dynamic to watch. What about line mates? We're told that DeBrusk is going to play with him. Who do you want to see on the other wing there?
I think I'd be prepared to start with Höglander, but I also know that Höglander was a healthy scratch in the playoffs. Like, just when you think that Nils Höglander has arrived and sort of erased some of the doubts about his all-around game in the National Hockey League, and then you get to the playoffs, and he underperformed in the playoffs, no question. Nobody on that line of Paterson, Mikheyev, and Höglander can look themselves in the mirror and say they did what they were supposed to do in the playoffs. But, look, 3 head coaches for Nils Höglander at the NHL level, and they've all sort of had the same concerns. From the hash marks down in the offensive zone, there's no question that there's a guy that can generate offense, but there are other areas in the game and on the rink, and I think he continues to have to work at those. But when I look at sort of on paper here in the middle of July as a depth chart, I think I'd be prepared to go into the season with Höglander, DeBrusk, and Paterson, and then put Danton Heinen on the wing with JT Miller and Brock Boeser, and hope that that's your top 6. Now, is Danton Heinen, I'm not sure that he's a perfect top 6 player, right? But in a salary cap world, every team's going to have some warts somewhere along the line. And that's why I said earlier that if it doesn't work for Heinen, he's a pretty versatile guy. You can find other ways to utilize him, and Pia Suter can slide back in there with JT and Brock. So Vasily Podkolzin, a little bit of a wild card, obviously, but I'm just in the camp that I can't, from a guy that couldn't find any offense to his game down the stretch in the playoff games that he played, to think that this is going to be such a monumental offseason that he's going to come to camp and bang down the door to be a top 6 guy. Like, whoa, let's slow the roll there. Like baby steps, work your way into the lineup and then take it from there. But yeah, I mean, I think that's how I would look at certainly their top 6. And I like the idea of Pia Suter between Garland and Joshua. I just think as much as Teddy Bluger had that incredible run with those 2 last year, Pia Suter is a better offensive player. He's got more offensive chops. He's got better production on his resume. And sure, Bluger was terrific in a short run there, but I think you're asking an awful lot to think that he can sort of find that lightning in a bottle again. And Teddy Bluger has settled into, he's got a role here, and he's going to have an increased role in terms of penalty killer and sort of taking on those hard minutes and all of that. So leave him be in that role as a 4th line center. I would like to see Pius Suter get a chance between Garland and Joshua.
Well, you got two options there, which
He's
is
a much
nice.
better finisher.
You got two options, so you can go one way or the other. It doesn't sound like negotiations with Brock Boeser are really going to begin in earnest this summer, which puts some pressure on his start to the season, doesn't it? If they're not going to talk extension here over the course of the summer, all of a sudden the weight is on Brock's shoulders to back up the 40-goal season. How do you think he reacts to that kind of a pressure?
There's risk on both sides, because if he comes out of the gates and does what he did last year, and I'm not expecting 4 on opening night, but certainly that was a springboard for him in his 40-goal season. He got off to this incredible start. And the one thing with Brock Boeser is he scores in bunches. We saw that. He's had a 4-goal game. He had 2 hat tricks. I think he had 6 2-goal games. So he can jack his totals in a hurry with a couple of big nights along the way. I'm sure he'd like to have a couple of those nights early on just to get the feel and to sort of ease any doubts that he has or that people have about the blood clot. Training camp's going to be important for him just to show that he's completely healthy going into a platform year. Health has been an issue for him throughout his career, as we know as well. But look, this is a team that's in win now mode. He scored 40 for them last year. And this is a team that we've talked about needing more help from the wings. And now all of a sudden, this idea that, maybe he doesn't fit in to the long-term picture here. This one's going to be fascinating to watch, because is he the kind of player that's going to age gracefully, right? We've all doubted his skating. As he gets older and the league gets faster, is this going to be a guy that's going to be able to keep up well into his 30s? And I think that's a fair question. So we'll see how that goes. But it goes back to what I said about Demko. Like, at some point, as much as you like these guys, and they can all be fan favorites, you just can't go around handing out 7-year and 8-year extensions to every player. There has to be sort of that, crunch point. And I do wonder if Brock Boeser is going to fall on the wrong side of that with this management group. But again, you're in win now mode. If he's having a fine season, all of a sudden you're going to turn and pedal your leading goal. One is hard to sort of square for me.
The Leafs are a good warning here. Like, you just keep keeping the band together.
Especially when the band hasn't done anything other than the second round.
Right. But it's expensive to keep the band together. And if you're not getting past the second round, it's maybe a sign that the band isn't that great.
There's the other, Saravelli talks about this all the time. Most Stanley Cup playoff series are a 50-50 toss-up.
Yeah.
Right? Just keep banging the door. Just keep getting there year in, year out. One of these years, it turns your way. Boeser,
just quickly on Boeser, look, Bo Horvat got the squeeze, right? And basically it took them a year, but they've taken Bo Horvat's money and essentially given it now to Filip Hronek. So it's not like, this is where I come back to this cap cushion. Like, at some point, you'd like to see them have some money in, there aren't any big contracts coming off the books. If you look at Puckpedia now, for next year, Brock Boeser is the big contract that would be coming off the books, and they're going to have a decision to make here on him. And we know that he's a popular guy coming off a 40-goal season where he sort of finally arrived in the National Hockey League. And yet I do think that this signal by upper management that, we're not even going to talk extension with him here in the offseason is this idea that if he doesn't get off to a good start, then his time here could be in jeopardy.
They may have to redeploy. Yep. Awesome stuff, Jeff. I know you're heading on a vacation. Enjoy that, and we'll catch up a couple weeks down the road.
All right, guys. Thanks.
Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres and Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.